Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Hater Radio. My name is Chris McLean. This is a brand dedicated to college football. As you can see by the cryon below me, Ian is not here tonight, but he'll be back for Wednesday's show, which I'll be in Florida for because I'm going to go to the Florida State game. And so look forward to that. But let's get into it. This is week 12 recap show. So we're going to go over the games that occurred yesterday. A lot of really good games. There were some real close ones, especially the first one we're going to talk about, which was the Florida-Missouri game. I mean, this game, I am a Florida fan, so obviously I wanted them to win. But, if you're not a fan of either of these teams, you probably would have been pretty happy just watching this because it was back and forth. I think there was 6, 7, 8. I think 8 lead changes. Let me see. Let me just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lead changes. That's crazy. I mean, and Florida at one point had like an 89.8 chance of winning the game. I think it was even higher than that. Someone was saying even higher, but I'm looking at the probability and it looks like I'm not seeing it right. I guess it's not giving me that fourth down where that 4th and 17 obviously was the crucial play. But let's get into it a little bit more before we get to that. But, back and forth, obviously, with the lead changes. The offense for Florida actually looked really good. Going into the second half, they really, opened up the half right. I really like when they defer in these games because I've always liked it. I guess it was like when Dan Mullen started doing it, was one of their bigger things where they always deferred because they tried to score at the end of the half and get the ball to start to then score again. And you're basically getting a 2 for none and, putting a lot of pressure on the other team. And, Mullen did that all the time when he was at Florida. And, Billy has been a little bit suspect as far as end of half stuff. And at the beginning of the half there, they did well and they moved the ball really well, and they scored off of a ETN long reception, which was set up nicely by Mertz. He drew the defender, and ETN just took off from there. And ETN had an amazing game. He had over 100 yards all purpose on the ground and through the air. And Montrell as well had a great game. Ricky had a phenomenal game. I think he had over 100 yards all purpose as well. All three, Montrell, Ricky, and ETN all had amazing games. Even Trey Wilson had a really good game, even though they didn't have him in as many plays as the focus as they probably should have had, but he still had a pretty solid game overall. I'm trying to think. He had 7 catches for 23 yards, which obviously is not good, but he also had a touchdown. I thought he had more yards, but I guess I was mistaken because a lot of the plays that he had there was at least 2 of those like touch passes where they like throw it in front of him. So it's technically a pass, not a handoff. And those resulted in very short plays, some of them a yard, maybe less, maybe loss. Um, Definitely not his best game. And that's what I like. And I don't know. Maybe they were focusing on him more, and the rest of the guys really went off. Khalil Jackson had a couple of good catches, especially one later in the game. Um, you know, I don't fault the offense in this game at all. Obviously, when Graham Mertz was playing well until he got hurt, he's running for it on a third down, I believe, and he has to get the marker to get the first down. And he runs through like at least two guys to get to the marker, and then like two other guys tackle him as well. So he got hit by four guys and suffered a collarbone injury that more than likely is going to derail the rest of the year for him. So he'll be out at least a couple of months. Hopefully he comes back. I don't know. At this point, it's up in the air what's going to happen with him. He still has another year of eligibility. If he comes back, it brings a lot of stability to the offense. The offense was moving, even though that he didn't have a lot of time because of the offensive line. And speaking of the offensive line, there was quite a few injuries there with Barber and then George going out. And our Barber didn't even start, I believe. And then George went out during the game. And then Waits came in, and I can't remember the other guy that's the tackle that was in. But, the offensive line, was obviously better the rest of the half after those injuries. And I'm not to say that they're not, I don't know. I mean, not Waits, but George has struggled mightily throughout the year, and he's been a bit of an issue with really good defensive ends. And so it was nice to see some, blocking there on those ends to be able to make a little bit more time. Max Brown came in, and he played remarkably well for a guy that's never played significant snaps before. He did fumble the ball when they were driving, which after the fumble and recovery by Missouri, 2 plays later, they scored on a long TD. So that could have been a difference maker in the game, because if they even just score a field goal there, and, not that they take away that score, but from Missouri, but you never know what could happen after Florida would have potentially, I think they would have gone up in that instance. Instead, they ended up going down by 9. And, let me get back to Max Brown real quick, though. But Max Brown played really well. He made a lot of scrambles on plays that looked like they were going nowhere, which, give credit to him and his athleticism. He had a nice throw to Khalil Jackson that I talked about earlier that, was set them up for, I believe, a touchdown. And then, it's tough to say what's going to happen. It's, Max Brown is going to be the starter for this week against Florida State. I'll talk about Florida State in a little bit. Obviously, there's news there, but I want to talk about that specifically outside of this game. But, the defense, they struggled in a lot of ways. They gave up over 500 yards, and Schrader, of course, went off, which everyone knew he probably would. He had 148 yards on the ground, a TD, a long TD run. And Brady Cook looked phenomenal. He had 331 yards in the air. But as much as the defense struggled, they still came up big late to force a stop and give the ball back to the offense, which the offense went down the field and kicked that field goal. I saw some people talking about how, they should have been more aggressive down in the red zone against Missouri and try to punch in for a touchdown. And, yes, they could have been, but again, with a young quarterback who is still learning stuff and just jumped or forced into action against one of the better defenses in the all of SEC, and then one of the better defenses in all of the country. And, he did remarkably well besides all that. And it would have been, I don't know, they could have forced the issue, but I'm glad they didn't. They got the field goal. Trevor Etienne should have went down. I don't know why he went out of bounds. That's something they haven't done yet so far this year. So maybe he just was unaware that he should have gone down. It would have forced them to use their last timeout, which didn't end up costing them because they only used the timeout when they had their fourth down on that 4th and 17. But maybe if they don't have that timeout in that instance, then they get a flag. I mean, on that 4th and 17, obviously the coverage was lax, and they forgot Luther Burden for whatever reason, who is one of the better players in the country. But clearly on it, you could see Princely being held from the view behind the play, shooting forward, towards the defense. Princely's coming in, and that guy, Princely beats him, and the guy just is got his arm all over him, and it's clearly a hold. But they're not going to call that. But whatever, it should have been called. But it is a shame because it was 4th and 17, and they should have got this. They should have got that stop. I don't know. I was completely beside myself when that happened because it was they were they were definitely deserving of winning this game, and all they really had to do was get that stop. And it's such a shame because the rest of the team played really well. All the defense had to do was just get off the field on one play, and it's oh man, because then it was after that, they couldn't do anything, because it was even if that, even with getting the 4th and 17 conversion, they couldn't stop them from that play on. The rest of the plays, there was at least I think 2 or 3 plays where Missouri just was wide open. I don't know, the coverage was so soft. They just gave them so much opening, and it was why? I mean, I know it didn't necessarily matter because this kicker can kick from so far, but it's if they had at least made it a more difficult kick, maybe there's a chance that he could miss. This guy's obviously not perfect. There's a chance that he could miss, but they basically let them get into the 20-yard line, and it was a 35-yard kick at that point, and he's not going to miss that. That's a layup for him. But I don't know. The offense is doing better. Mertz is obviously done for the year, so we'll see with Brown going forward. But the defense is just still bad, and they just need to figure stuff out because this is another week of huge numbers for opposing teams' offense. It was 700 and whatever last week to LSU, and this week 500. So it's frustrating. It's as frustrating as a fan to watch this team give up so much yardage. But again, the bright side is almost half the starting defense is freshmen. So they're getting a lot of experience, and with the recruiting class coming in, hopefully it maintains this level of class, because they've had some decommits lately. But if they can keep that going, mix them in with the guys that are already there, getting their experience. So it should be a lot better next year defensive wise. I know I see a lot of comparisons of the 2007 defense where they struggled, giving up a lot of points to a bunch of teams. And the next year they were all world. I know it's not going to be all world next year for this defense, but even I know we've talked about it, I've talked about it and I've heard it elsewhere where it's if they're just 50th or 60th in the nation defensively, that is enough to be able to compete in the SEC and to be winning, instead of 5-6 games, winning 8-9 games, which that really needs to be the difference right now. So let's move on and mention Richard's big victory for UCLA. I know Richard already commented about the UCLA winning. So UCLA wins big. It was 38-20. And this game was like second half, it was just not close. And, there was a lot of turnovers for the Trojans. UCLA looked really good on offense. Gerbers, had a really or Garbers. I don't even know how you say it. I hear Gerbers or Garbers. I'm going to say Garbers. I don't know. Maybe Richard will correct me. But Garbers had a great game. Yeah, he was completely in command of this offense. He looked really good. He made a lot of really great plays, especially ones where he was taking heat and he still got the playoff. So he had 3 TDs. The running back Harden had a really good game. Defensively, Letu Latu had a really good game. He had like 2 sacks right in a row against USC that shut down one of their drives. He's a stud. If you don't know who this kid is, Letu Latu is going to be probably a top 20 pick in the NFL draft coming up. So he's definitely someone to look out for. Yeah, really the turnovers were the difference because USC had 3 of them. At least one of them led to points for UCLA. And because the stats are pretty similar, everything else. So that was really the difference. And, it was especially that fumble return for a touchdown. It was like right after UCLA had scored to go up 21-10. And then UCLA gets a scoop and score. And that was it. Like there was like no coming back because UCLA just snuffed it out. And the defense, UCLA's defense to hold this USC offense to 20 points is remarkable because they've scored on basically everyone. That's how good this UCLA defense is. It's been good all year. I've been a huge proponent of it. Defensive coordinator Lynn has come in and done a masterful job of really turning around this defense, making it one of the better defenses in the entire country. So he's going to get a lot of praise. There was obviously a lot of heat on Coach Chip Kelly coming into the game. They said he was going to get fired. He didn't end up getting fired because they would have said something today. He wins the game. Maybe it was like a ploy to pressure him to make him realize he needed to win the game. And you know what he does? And they actually have a chance. They're 7-4 right now. If they win their next game, which is against, I think it's Cal. Yeah, against Cal, which Cal is not the greatest of team. They could win that game. That's a winnable game. 8-4, considering the struggles they've had, the 2 losses against the Arizona schools, the terrible loss against Utah, where they only allowed 7 points on defense. The Oregon State debacle, where they just got blown out in that game. They just weren't the better team there. But honestly, if UCLA can get one more victory, get 8-4, and then potentially win their bowl game, completely different story than what we were looking at, like coming off those 2 losses against the Arizona schools. So hats off to them. And I'll just talk about USC real quick before we end it, because obviously they're involved in this game as well. And so this is by far the most disappointing team this year. They came in with a Heisman winning quarterback set to be potentially a top 5 at the beginning of the year, the number 1 overall pick. Maybe he'll be a top 5 pick. He'll probably be in the top 5. But regardless, a very amazing quarterback, like I said, won the Heisman and had the chance to, get into the playoff, do some things, be a contender for the Pac-12 championship. And none of that happened. No Heisman repeat, nothing. I would have thought that Caleb would have been up there for the Heisman, but with so many losses, it pretty much knocked him out. And, it's sad because all really Lincoln Riley had to do, God, Caleb Williams still had 3,600 yards and 30 TDs. Like, he still had a great game, a great season. And, he could have, let me see what it says rushing wise. It doesn't say. I hate how they do that. They don't show rushing for quarterbacks. Like, come on. Like, give me what rushing they do. Of course they're but no, Caleb, just phenomenal year, regardless of the issues. He had 41 touchdowns again, just a great year. It's not on him. It is, like I was trying to say, Lincoln Riley brought back Alex Grinch for whatever reason. They obviously were friends. He was at Oklahoma when Lincoln Riley was there. He brought him from Norman to LA to be the defensive coordinator. Had a bad year last year. He should have fired him, and was probably the reason they didn't win the Pac-12 championship last year. And if they had just fired him, got a better coordinator in there, and considering that you have a generational talent in Caleb Williams, and you would have made such a difference there. But no, they hold on to this guy, and it derails their entire season. They 7-5. There's no way this team should be 7-5. At worst, they should have been 10-2. There's no reason for them to have lost as many games, and it's a shame. Anyways, so moving on to USF-UTSA, I don't know what to say with this game, because USF was up 14-7, and then UTSA scored, I believe, 28 straight points. There was a point in the second quarter where UTSA has the ball. It's 3rd and 14. If USF gets a stop, they at least get out of the half down by, I believe, 7. It was 21-14. They don't get the stop. It was really close. They reviewed it as well. I don't know. It looked like he potentially wasn't there, but they gave it to him anyways. But if they get the stop there, they get out of the half, and then potentially give them some momentum going into the third quarter, where maybe if they get a stop there, they have the ball to tie. But they allow them to convert. They score on that drive. They get the ball at the start of the half, and UTSA goes up 35-14 in like 5 minutes of gameplay. So that was basically it right there. So it's frustrating to see stuff like that. The defense, again, the theme of 3 of these teams that we cover is, what's the problem with these teams? USF has one of the better offenses in the country. Byron Brown is, top 10 in total offense out of everyone in the nation. Caleb Williams and the offense is one of the best offenses in the country, top 5, I believe. Florida's offense, not the best, but still largely a good enough offense to contend in the SEC. All 3 defenses are terrible, like just not good in any way, shape, or form. There are pieces there on each of them that have, enough there. Yeah, Mike, I'm sorry, but USF, the only reason it's not a good program is because they didn't get an on-campus stadium when they should have, and the facilities kind of went downhill. And it's also Willie Taggart. When he left, Charlie Strong, that was really the failure there of USF, when they tried to get a retread who had been fired at Texas. And, I was guilty as anyone for thinking that Charlie Strong was going to be a good coach, but he obviously failed, and recruiting wise was terrible. I don't know, Mike, you forget that USF went 10-2 in 2017 and was 10-1 going up against UCF with a chance to go to the AAC championship game. So it's not like they're that far away. That was only 6 years ago. That wasn't that long ago. Jeff Scott obviously didn't do much the last several years as well, only winning 4 games. And Alex Golish in 1 year has already surpassed the amount of wins that Jeff Scott had in his entire career at USF. So, Mike, I know you just don't know USF. I know you know Florida State, dude, but you just don't know USF. So, spare me on your comment. But anyways, so USF, the offense is very good. Sean Atkins broke the records for, I believe, receiving yards and receptions in a single season for a USF player, and I'm so happy for him. The kid's amazing. He'll probably, hopefully, he can get a shot in the NFL and be like that Wes Welker position, the slot receiver, and you see him for like 5-6 years, make a good living, and I hope he does. I hope, I can see it. He's very sure-handed and very smart player. Naquan Wright was a stud all year. The rest of the receivers were very good as well. They had a lot of good games where they were putting up huge numbers. I think what's his name, Simmons or Simeon, had a really good game against I believe Rice. And so the offense is there. They're moving on to the Charlotte game with the potential of getting into bowl eligibility. They have to win. The game's at home. I think they can win that game. The Charlotte team is not very good. Their offense is kind of terrible, so plays in South Florida's favor. Their defense is kind of whatever. So if the Bulls can just put up like, a normal 30 to 35 night that they're used to, that I think they can go on and get bowl eligibility, which would be great because that gives a lot more practices to some of the younger guys and gives some momentum to the bowl game. And then if they win the bowl game, momentum into next year, into recruiting, and then into the spring game, and then moving forward from there as well. So great first year so far by Alex Golish. Tough loss here to UTSA, but they have a chance to get bowl eligibility, and I think they can. Okay, moving forward, the first thing I want to talk about, and I hope, Mike, you're still there because obviously I'm going to talk about this. So Florida State, North Alabama. Florida State was down early, and then Jordan Travis breaks his leg severely. It was very gruesome. It's hard to watch. And I feel bad for him. It sucks because this was the end of his career. And, I think there's still a possibility of like a medical red shirt, but I don't think he would. This just kind of screws him as well, because if he was to get drafted in the NFL, now it's like, what NFL team is going to draft a guy that is got a broken leg that's going to take at least a year to get back to? Yeah, and that's what I'm going to talk about, Mike. I don't think Florida State, well, I still think that they probably wouldn't have gotten in even with him. There's a chance that Georgia wins out, Ohio State wins out, Washington would win out, and then they might have put in Texas over Florida State because of that Texas win over Alabama. Yeah, of course Washington goes. Washington's a way better team than Florida State. Washington has the best quarterback, the best wide receiver. They have a really good defense. They've also have victories against Utah, Oregon State, USC. I don't really see Florida State having that many good victories. The only one you could really look at is LSU, but LSU already has 3 losses. So, like, how good of a victory is that? And it was a neutral site game as well in Florida. Considering what Washington's gone through, the gauntlet of Pac-12, Pac-12 is a way better conference than the ACC. It's probably the best conference this year. I would have to argue it is, because if you look at how strong all of those teams are, even right now with Arizona coming on strong, they're going to be, I think they're 8-3 right now, which, Arizona at 8-3, Oregon at 10-1, Washington at 11-0. Oregon State, I believe, at 8-3. Utah's kind of fallen off, but they're still solid at like 7-4. All of those teams are very solid, and they can compete against anyone in the country. I envision them having a really good bowl season as well with all those teams. Well, with my thought, Mike, would be Alabama losing to Georgia, because if Georgia wins, Alabama has 2 losses, so they would be done. And then it would be Georgia, Washington, Ohio State, or Michigan winner, and then Texas potentially if they win out. And I think that would hold true, because then Texas would also possibly avenge their loss to Oklahoma, which is I think Oklahoma State still has the tiebreaker with Oklahoma right now. So I'll have to look at that on Tuesday before we do the show, because I did not look at that yet. But besides that, I just don't think Florida State is good enough. They don't have, I mean, all of their road games. No, loser of Michigan, Ohio State does not deserve the. Maybe Ohio State, possibly, because they played Notre Dame, Penn State, but no, Notre Dame, Ohio State, maybe, but I don't. I think the loser of the Michigan Ohio State game goes away. So because also the winner of the Michigan Ohio State game goes to the Big Ten championship game, and they'll have a victory over, I believe, a 9-2 right now Iowa team. So there's a chance that they'll get more cushion there. But I still don't. There's no way that they're gonna grant, because the Big Ten, there's so many teams that are so bad in their conference. Really, the only good teams this year in Big Ten are Ohio State, Michigan, and maybe Penn State. But Penn State has been terrible against. Yeah, Iowa's not good. Trust me, Iowa's offense is terrible, and they're really only having that good of a record because they don't play anybody. So it's easy. They have a good defense, but they're playing like terrible teams, all year. So it's easy to get a good record when you're not playing anybody. Okay. Moving on real quick, we'll run through these. The Louisville-Miami game, it was back and forth. Restrepo looked really good for Miami. They were trading TDs back and forth, but Louisville kept coming back. They were answering. They got a late TD. That TD was terrible by Miami, because the 2 defenders run right into each other. And I was like, oh my God. And the guy just runs scot-free. And that was like 4 minutes left in the game. Miami had a shot. They actually had a decent throw by Tyler Van Dyke into the end zone that was a little short, that bounced off, and Restrepo caught it, and he just couldn't run away from the defender, and so he got tackled like at the 3-yard line. But Louisville clinches a spot in the ACC championship game. This is a huge surprise team. This has got to be the biggest surprise all year, because most people thought when their coach left, I can't even remember his name, worst loss CFP history. But when Louisville came into this year, that they were going to struggle, but they brought back Braum, or not brought back, but they brought him in. He's an alum. Braum comes in, and the guy is smart on offense. He's very talented. He got a lot out of Purdue the last couple of years. Got them to the Big Ten championship game last year. And if he gets more talent, which I think Louisville usually gets better talent than Purdue, for whatever reason, obviously Lamar Jackson and some others throughout the years, Teddy Bridgewater. So maybe he'll be able to recruit there. And so if that's the case, this is just the start for Louisville. And they're already 10-1, with a chance next week to beat Kentucky. And if they beat Florida State, I don't know, things could get weird, and maybe they get into the playoff. I don't think so. It would have to be, because that loss to Pitt just looks terrible. Like, it's a 2-win or 3-win Pitt team. Like, that is not a good look for the playoff if you have a team like that getting in. But I've seen stranger things, so you never know. But anyways, Louisville gets the win here. And moving on to Michigan, actually, Maryland. I didn't have this game on our list of games to watch because I thought Michigan was going to run away with this one. But Maryland actually made a game of it. But it was like the fourth quarter, Maryland had the ball like consistently. They kept making stops and getting the ball back. But every time they got the ball back, they got it like inside their 5. And so they never had a chance to really like get out of their own end zone. So they just kept being forced having to turn the ball over to Michigan. And finally, Michigan runs out the clock. But anyone that was calling for J.J. McCarthy to be a Heisman frontrunner or finalist, dude was 12 for 23, 141 yards and a pick. I'm sorry. This guy is garbage. He is not a good quarterback. Anyone who drafts him in the first round is an idiot. And there are probably going to be plenty of NFL GMs that fall for it. Good luck with that. And I hope to God it's not the Bucks, because I do not want to see this guy drafted in my team. You know, good luck, kid. I just don't. You're basically at this point like a Zach Wilson, and probably worse because your stats aren't even good as his in college. So moving on, Oklahoma BYU. Dylan Gabriel actually goes out in this game. So BYU had their chance. They had a backup as well, Retzlaff, who played admirably. He had a really bad pick 6, and that was basically the turning point in the game because Oklahoma gets the pick 6 and then runs it back, and it was a 100-yard pick 6, and they had the lead there. Retzlaff comes back, gets another touchdown for them, but then Sawchuk came in. He had a great game. Sawchuk looked amazing in this game. He had 107 yards and a TD on the ground. This Oklahoma team is not giving up, only has 2 losses. They have a real shot at the Big 12 championship. They have next week against TCU. It's going to be a tough game. And they have to hope that Oklahoma State loses, and Oklahoma State plays BYU. So you never know. You know, Oklahoma State looked really bad against UCF. They came back and beat Houston. There's a chance there. But Oklahoma has to win. They cannot have the same record as Oklahoma State because Oklahoma State has a tiebreaker. Okay, next game, Arizona, Utah. Arizona just came out the gates and they were up 28-0 within a blink of an eye. It was kind of remarkable. When I looked at the score, I was like, that's not right. 28-0. I mean, just because with the defense that Utah has, I would think they'd have been more sure tacklers in this game, but they were missing stuff left and right, especially early. There was a couple of like tunnel screens that just went for like 30, 40 yards. Really, one of the differences was the punt block return for a touchdown. That was huge because that really kind of opened the floodgates. And they went up 28-0. They ended up winning 42-18. So Arizona, 8-3. Okay, you got Louisville, huge surprise team. Arizona, huge surprise team. You know, you almost never can predict what teams will come out of nowhere and really set the world ablaze. And Louisville and Arizona are the 2 of those teams right now. Okay, I had high hopes for Tennessee in this game. This is a Georgia-Tennessee game I'm talking about. You know, Tennessee has an offense that can move the ball quite well and looks good against certain teams. Teams with good defenses, they struggle. They struggled against Missouri last week, and they struggle this week against Georgia. I would have thought the game being in Knoxville, they would have had a much better game, but they end up only putting up 10 points. They lose 38-10. And then, you know, I don't know. This Georgia team is really good. I'm not going to lie. It is frustrating as a Florida fan to see them do so well, but Beck looks really good. He was 24 of 30, which is like basically 75%. And 298 yards and 3 TDs. That's almost like a perfect game. Milton on the ground, like they do like running back by committee. So Milton only had 68 yards, but he had a TD. Rosemary St. Is it Rosemary St. James Jack Saint? That's what it is. It's a weird name. Maybe they were spelling it wrong. Rosemary Jack Saint. That's not right. I don't know if that's right. I've heard the name, and it's a long name. Either ways, he had a really good game. I think he had a touchdown throw as well. No, Dylan Bell threw it. Okay, Dylan Bell had the touchdown throw, and then he had the touchdown catch as well. And then Brock Bowers had a touchdown reception. I don't think he had that great of a game. Brock Bowers. Oh, he had 7 catches. Just in the time that I watched, he didn't look like he was doing anything. Maybe it was second half that all that happened. But this team is very good. The defense is solid. They obviously shut down this Volunteer offense that scored right away in the beginning of the game, and you would have thought, oh, here he goes. But no, that was like the only really thing that they did all game. The rest of it, besides that play, if you take that play out, which was 75 yards, they had like 55. They only had like 200 yards besides that 75-yard play. That's crazy. That is ridiculous. The rest of the game, it was literally the first play of the game. So Tennessee loses. Tennessee is 7-4. So whatever. Sorry about your luck, but Georgia moves on. I am still interested in this Georgia Tech game next week because Georgia Tech is finally not terrible. And you know, it should be interesting. It's a night game. It looks like it's in Atlanta. I can't tell. It's not. And Georgia Tech is 6-5. Obviously, they're not a terrible team. They lost to Clemson, but Clemson has kind of rebounded a little bit last couple of weeks. You know, they beat Notre Dame, they beat North Carolina, and then they beat Georgia Tech there. So they kind of rebounded quite a bit. But Georgia Tech beat North Carolina. They beat Miami. They beat Syracuse last week or this week. And then I don't know. I mean, anything can happen in a rivalry game. It's a lot more different than just a regular game. But again, Georgia Tech is definitely not on the same level as Georgia. We'll talk more about that when we come up to this week, but still interesting to look at. I think Georgia Tech can at least kind of put a scare into them. Okay, last couple of games. Oregon, Arizona State. Oregon, dude, blows the doors off Arizona State. This game was never close. This was 49-13. Just a dusting. I mean, it was 42-0 at halftime. And, this Arizona State team is limited in a lot of ways. It's definitely probably one of the most limited teams that I've seen in a long time. But they actually make do with what they have. Scattaboo, their jackknife of a multi-tooled player who can do everything. He's phenomenal at the trick plays. That's really what they do. They just kind of run trick plays. But that when you go up against a really good team like Oregon, who's very good defensively and very efficient offensively, they're going to destroy you. And if that's all you're doing, and they laid waste to them. I mean, it was never close. They had 603 yards of offense and held Arizona State to 316. Yeah, it was a blowout. Never close. Last couple of ones, like I said, I didn't get to actually watch the Kansas State-Kansas highlights because there was no package anywhere, which I don't understand with Fox. When they have games on FS1, for whatever reason, they don't put out packages, highlight packages for those games. You know, if I were a fan of those teams and I want to see what they did, I would be complaining to Fox to put something out because ESPN doesn't care. And so they don't put anything out. And so it's like, it's up to really Fox to do something, and they don't seem to really care, which these are two really good teams. They're at that point, it was a battle to see who goes 8-3 with a slight chance of getting to the Big 12 championship game. So I don't know why they didn't show it. Off my high horse there. But, you know, Kansas was limited here. Ballard came into play again for Bean, and they struggled. Howard for Kansas State played well, and they were moving the ball quite well. They had, Kansas still moved the ball, but it just wasn't enough. I watched the fourth quarter at least, and Kansas State was just controlling the clock really at the end, and that was the difference. They scored a lot early, really quick, and then it was like late they were able to run out the clock, especially once they went ahead in the fourth quarter. So Kansas State wins 31-27, and, you know, ending Kansas's really good run. But still, you know, Kansas, a team that was predominantly for the last several years terrible, now doing quite well. It's good to see them moving forward. And even though they've had their struggles with their quarterback issues because of injuries, so we'll see what they do going forward. Hopefully they can win the last game, and which is against Cincinnati. I think they should beat Cincinnati, and then they have a good shot of winning their bowl game too. So we'll see. Last two, but this one is a big one. It is Washington, Oregon State. And I didn't watch this game live because I was watching the Florida Missouri game, but what a hell of a game. You know, this was back and forth. Oregon State had the ball with not much time left, had a real opportunity to try to score, and they just couldn't do it. But Washington wins 22-20. You know, Michael Penix did what he needed to do to put the team in position to win. He had 3 TDs, 2 in the air, 1 on the ground. Odunze looked phenomenal again. Just an amazing game. This kid is a stud. Definitely going to be a top 10 pick in the NFL. Johnson, the running back for Washington, had a good game, but he fumbled heading into the end zone at one point, and that really could have been a difference maker, because if they can score there, would have been great. I think, but I'm almost positive that there was an interception after that fumble anyways. Yeah, it was. There was a fumble, and then Oregon State fumbled as well. So I guess it kind of washes itself out, because then Washington ended up scoring, but still it could have been a backbreaker there, because the game was still 9-7 at that point. But Washington wins, moving forward 11-0, setting up the Apple Cup next week against Washington State. If they can go undefeated into the game, the Pac-12 championship game, with a real shot at the playoff on the line, basically a quarterfinal game will be for Oregon and Washington. Well, both those teams still have to win. Washington and Oregon have tough games. Their rivalry games against Washington State, like I said, and Oregon going up against Oregon State. So 2 very tough teams. I can see Washington and Oregon winning, but with this Pac-12, you never know. And there's always a lot of craziness when it comes down to the last couple of games in the season. So we'll see, especially rivalry week. Okay, last game, Texas, Iowa State. Texas had pretty much control of this game for the most part. They win 26-16. Iowa State came back with a late TD in the fourth quarter to make it a 1-score game. But then Auburn hits a field goal to put them up. This Texas team, man, Quinn Ewers, I'm telling you, man, look out for them. If they can win out, they have a real shot at getting into the playoff. They just have to win next week against, I believe they're playing Texas Tech. Yeah, Texas Tech, and then they're playing the other participant in the Big 12 championship game. So I think right now that they have locked in their spot. No, they haven't, because if they have one more loss, they would tie with Oklahoma. Then Oklahoma would go in, and Texas has not played Oklahoma State. I can't remember what the tiebreaker is. I think I have it here. There's just a ton of teams, so it's really kind of hard to tell until we figure out next week. So it's going to be between basically Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and Texas to see who goes into the Big 12 championship game. It's still wide open at this point. But Texas, if they win out, they get in. And then, like I said, if they win the Big 12 championship and having that, a big win there and the victory against Alabama, that should propel them into the playoff. And I like their chances because considering Florida State lost their quarterback, Jordan Travis, and, with Quinn Ewers coming back, I can think that this Texas team has a really good shot at getting in. So that is the show. I hope you enjoyed all these games. Next week is rivalry week. I'll be live in Tampa for the Wednesday show. Sunday, I don't know where I'm going to do it from, but Saturday I'll be at the game, Florida State, and I will be recording a bunch of stuff and put it on, once I put it together, probably the couple days after that, and then we'll go from there. And then, so this is winding down. The season's almost over. So I hope you enjoy everything because it doesn't last. It's only like 4 months and you have 8 months of misery. So that's it. But that is the show. You can reach us at haterradio.com for all of our articles. We'll probably have one up about the Florida State game, and I may do one as well. And then also you can reach us at all of our socials, which are Hater Radio, at Hater_radio for Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. For YouTube, it is at Hater Radio. For Facebook, it is Hater Radio CFB. haterradio1@gmail.com if you want to email us. Again, I'm Chris McLean, and I'll talk to y'all later. Have a good one.